Supervisors, registration and duties of King William County. Olivia.
Mr. Miskowski.
Here.
Mr. Greenwood.
Here.
Mr. Hanson. Mr. Earhart.
Here.
Mr. Hodges.
Here, and just so everybody knows, Mr. Hanson contacted me and advised he would not be here, nor would he entertain the telephonic offering me. All right, is everyone reviewed, and if there are no changes, do I have an adoption of the meeting agenda?
Make a motion that we adopt the amended agenda. Second.
Olivia?
Mr. Greenwood.
Aye.
Mr. Earhart.
Aye.
Mr. Miskowski.
Aye.
Mr. Hodges.
Aye. Next item is 3A, County Administrator comment.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman and Board of Supervisors, I have crafted a document that I would like to read and put into the formal minutes. Each year, the county administration holds a Halloween event for staff. It is meant to be a fun-filled time to bring staff together. The event has been well received and costumes have always been funny and harmless. This year, a constitutional office was dressed in costumes that was inappropriate and unprofessional. All of the staff attending the event thought the Commissioner of Revenue staff's costumes were inappropriate and made many feel very uncomfortable. The actions of these four individuals do not reflect the Board of Supervisors nor the county staff's views. The Commissioner of Revenue is an elected position and reports to the citizens of the county and not directly to the Board of Supervisors or the county administrator. As the county administrator, I would like to go on record to state the Commissioner of Revenue and her staff's actions give a black eye to all of us that professionally and respectfully serve the citizens of King William County. Thank you.
Thank you, Bobby. Yes, we're ready for, and I do agree with it. All right, next item is work session matters, A, schedules and amendments. Bobby, that's
Gentlemen, in preparation for the budget process for the fiscal year 2021, some of the departments came together and we started reviewing the fees that are charged for services. Planning and zoning, building inspections, regional animal shelter, utilities, and parks and recreation. What you have in front of you tonight are the three departments that the fees can be updated per resolution rather than ordinance. Planning and zoning and utilities requires public hearing and ordinances, whereas building inspections, regional animal shelter, and parks and recreation can be amended to resolution. What the staff has in front of you is, first off, building inspections. It's broken out between residential fees, commercial, and miscellaneous. And as you will note, and I did include some in the audience so that y'all would have those available to look at as well. Anything that there was no change states on the far right column, proposed fee no change. John Bull and Steve Hudgens, who are in the building department, made the majority of these recommendations. The first one, accessory structures or renovations, $15,000 or up in value. They're requesting that it be capped at $500 because in many cases, the older the current fee structure, the cost would exceed the value. They did ask that we include pool, residential pool for above ground and in ground. Above ground would be $100 permit, in ground would be $150. They did request that we delete change appliances and remove that completely. And then they asked that we add in re-inspection fee of $125, consultation fee of $125, manufactured homes / modular homes, $125, and prefab accessory structures under 600 square feet of $125. Those are the noted changes under the permits for residential. Plan review under residential, they requested that we move away from the square footage fee and go to a standard flat fee of $250. They also asked that we add in a pre-application plan review. These fees would then be incorporated as they move forward, so it would not be a double fee of $250. And then they asked that a change be made under the revision to approved plans to make us understand that that's acceptable as long as it's under 20% of the square footage. Under commercial fees for permits,
You want to go through all of these, or you want to, if we have discussion, questions, you want to hold them, how do you want to do it?
Well, let's do
I thought maybe
the, let's
we
do the residential
yeah.
fees and then there, any questions?
completely.
I'm going to back up actually, to make sure I understood what you said. We're still going to have a public hearing on these building fees? Isn't the resolution incorrect then? It says we conducted a public hearing on November 25th.
Oh, I'm sorry, it shouldn't be a public hearing, it should be,
Fourth paragraph in the end.
It's
Right next to the code section.
yeah, we'll strike public hearing because it's a, can be amended through resolution.
And they still will even advertise?
No,
So
these
we
three are
strike
by
all of that
resolution
line.
only, so I will strike where I incorrectly included public hearing. Only planning and zoning and utilities requires public hearings and ordinance changes. These are by resolution only.
I got it. All right. I think, Bob, we're on fees now, did you have something?
The pool residential above ground. Yes, I'm not sure that, why are we going to charge somebody if they want to put up a temporary pool?
It's not a temporary structure.
You can, I mean, how is pool residential above ground defined? I mean, is it the 3-foot ones? Is it the one where you have a deck around it? I mean,
That's what, and Ron, would you come up and assist because he was part of the work group? No, this is a permanent above-ground pool where you bring in and you set up your site, and most people do put some type of deck around it. This is not a temporary pool, this is not a kiddie pool or anything like that.
But is it defined?
so do we define pool residential above ground as something with a deck attached to it?
No,
Or something, you know, I mean, what's the distinction?
the distinction is it requires pumps. Is the biggest distinction. It has electricity going to it, it has pumps.
All pools have pumps.
Yeah, even the cheap pump pools have pumps.
Yeah, I mean, even the little 3-foot pools have pumps.
It's the concern there, we have to go out and inspect to make sure that the electricity and everything's supplying the pool, as well as the placement of the pool, make sure it's not on the drain field, and the attractive nuisance part, the fencing and all. But we don't have anywhere that sets out the construction parameters for our above ground pool. But if it's installed by, we're not talking about the little pools that somebody goes out and, you know, the Walmart pools, it's the ones that people need a permit to construct, somebody will not construct it.
As a homeowner, how do they know they need a permit?
They do not. It happens all the time.
I don't think I don't, it's a good idea myself. It's not defined.
Don't define something like that
Sorry, you saying something, Steve?
either. Yeah, I was saying, like I said, if they don't know and they don't get the permit, later on in the chapter, it says if you forget to get a permit, not only do you have to pay that, but the fines are doubled. So that's kind of giving them the double whammy, so I don't like that either, but I wanted to go back to something in the beginning about the resolution, but we can continue with what you were saying if you want.
And again, as far as the building department goes, the idea with anything that we need to inspect, it should be inspected for safety and make sure that it doesn't hurt anybody when you put it in. We want a permit fee for it, we want to cover the cost for going
I
out.
gotta agree with the rest, we need a defined type or something. I mean, it's so vague. And, I mean, when I first looked at it, I thought maybe the one you drug out the back of your car and filled over water. I mean, it doesn't say.
Definitely not for kiddie pools. But that's,
We can come up with a definition
Yeah.
and bring it back. The formal vote on any of this is not going to occur till the 25th of this month. So so.
Stephen, you had a question on the resolution?
Yeah, like I caught what you said in the beginning, I thought there had to be a public hearing, so now I'm totally not for any of this because of the, unfortunately, if the builders and stuff don't see this ahead of time, that's gonna be hell, so.
Well, the board made the decision back in 2015 that they would be able to amend the fees for building inspections by resolution. If the board does not want to continue that process, then all y'all need to do is let me know, and we will, though it will not be an ordinance, we can plan a public hearing for the 25th. Not a problem with that.
On which point? On the pools?
No, not the pool, that's the minutes for the main ordinance whole thing.
All right, who was involved in the work group, Ron?
Steve, Betty, John, myself, Ms. Tassinari, Natasha, who else?
That was good for planning, zoning, and building.
Yes.
Okay, was there any outreach to anybody in the development community on,
You know, what we
Thoughts
did,
on
we
this,
took
or are we trying to-
comparables, well, no, but we took comparables from like 5 different counties. We tried to see what the going rate was, because these fees were not really workable the way it is. So we looked at 5 different counties, we compared their categories to, you know, their fee structure, and we planned accordingly.
we updated them, but it was probably, well,
5 years.
we changed policy on how exactly we can update.
2015.
Yeah, so it makes sense that some of them need updating. I mean, I recall that we did do it that way because it was such a pain to do ordinance revisions, and you've got to advertise, and you've got to go 60 days and everything, to get it done. Now,
We did, as the work group, we did make a really solid effort to be fair and just bringing these fees.
sure, and I don't, the only one that's given me any really grief is the same one that's given everybody grief here, which is this pool permit deal, because it seems perhaps overly punitive, especially considering that, you know, half the people aren't gonna, probably more than half, aren't gonna know.
Well, I think,
they need a permit
I'll
going in.
think, I'll get up with John tomorrow, as far as the pool goes. Because I know the intent is not for the kiddie pools or the little inflatable pools and stuff, but the intent is these above-ground pools that do have the decks around them, that have, I mean, you know, they're major construction type.
Sure.
You think, looking at the electrical end of it, may, if you can define something involving that part, I can see the danger with the electrical.
Well, I'm gonna defer to John, I'll get up with John tomorrow, because he's the building official. I'm gonna take.
I think perhaps if we all saw exactly what was being inspected as a justification for it, that would probably be okay. Because I can tell you that if we just went out, you know, in the general public and said, above ground pool, it's a $100 permit fee, they would think you were crazy. But I understand, believe me, I understand that there, you know, but if we define what exactly we're looking at and the reason for it and justify the cost in it, then that's fine. But I would like to see some justification.
We'll take care of that tomorrow.
Okay.
Prefab accessory structure, we're basically talking about a shed, an outbuilding.
Yes. Over 256 square feet.
This is 600 square feet.
It's under 600 square feet.
Right, under 600, okay. So, we don't currently have a fee if someone wants to put in a shed? I thought we did. It
Well,
says there's no fee.
I have to look, let me sit back there.
If it's not in here, then it's not, there's not a case.
This is a little different than state code.
That's pretty big.
When state code dealing with anything under 12 by 12, you need nothing.
Right, that's the 256 I always throw out.
Okay.
That's 12 off the.
This just says under 600 square feet is why I'm asking that.
That just covers a larger category. And
But you don't need it under 144.
256, I think.
256.
I'm not sure on that. Again, we're on building.
There is a figure about state. Correct.
We'll check on that and with John to make sure that that wording is in there.
Where are we at now?
I don't think I really have anything else on residential.
Okay. Anybody else?
No, sir.
Commercial
And we did go through, plan reviews, you have anything on plan review?
You didn't change any plan reviews by resolution by ordinance.
Well, we just consolidated that, yeah.
Sorry.
No, we did do the plan review.
I just wanted to remind Bob that we had in fact gone through that.
Well, I mean, since you are bringing it up, I mean, I feel like it's putting, like, the average homeowner, it's hitting them and not hitting a big addition, because like I said, everything's small, like you said, maybe a 10 by 10 shed, where it would have been less than 1,000 square feet, $1,000. You're making them pay $250 no matter what.
It's for a house.
That's a
No,
house.
No.
Yeah, no, this is the plan review, so this would be for
Yeah,
houses. The
still.
accessory structure is covered.
Right, but still, so people that can't afford a big house are getting burdened with a huge fee, when it was before, 1,000 square foot house was only 100. So now we're making everybody, even if they can only afford a 1,000 square foot house, we're charging them $250, instead of making the others even higher.
But I can recall the last time that we went through this exercise as well, that there was a recommendation from Mr. Chardon at the time that we tried to consolidate this, because there really wasn't a vast difference between doing a plan review for, you know, a 1,500 square foot house or a
Hey,
2,500 square
That's the
foot.
justification.
I would say they'd have to spend rather much time.
Well, yeah, okay, that makes sense, but we need to maybe put that out there. It takes as much time to do a small one as it does to do, okay, that's all I want to mention, thanks.
Commercial? Commercial?
Commercial.
Just there.
I'm not yelling. Okay, go ahead.
Under commercial fees, the permits. We don't currently have a fee for a building permit fee. What is being proposed is that $100 flat fee plus $5 for each $1,000, up to $15,000 cap. The amusement rides, we want to include inflatables per the ride, so that'd be $100 per ride, and that's basically a safety feature. Temporary event tent over 900 square feet, again, that is a safety feature, adding that for $125 inspection. No changes, except when you come down to the sign, which was $100. John Bull and Steve Hudgen recommended that we delete that. Under commercial fees, plan review, they wanted to move away from the square footage, and the new construction or addition would go to 20% of total permit fee. Under plumbing, mechanical, electrical, fire suppression, and gas, not to exceed $5,000. Instead of using the square footage, they wanted a flat fee of $100. Same, but over $5,000, they wanted the square footage changed to $100 plus $4 per thousand over $5,000. Under conditions, capping it at 20% for square footage, and getting away from the square footage fee to a flat 100. And then the pre-application plan review fee upon application will go towards final fee. That's a new category, and that would be $500. And that's on commercial. Miscellaneous is the last category, which also deals with commercial. And in that category, we're taking out the temporary CO completely. We're taking out the non-exempt barn permit, the non-exempt barn plan review. We're taking out the review plans with professional seal. We are changing the permit after starting work. The current fee is fee plus $250. The proposed is the permit fee doubles. We're adding in building change of use, which we did not have before, at $250. We're adding building permit extension after 6 months, $100. And we're adding removal of building or structure at $100. That's a new addition.
What's the difference in that demolition? Would that be wrong? What's the difference in the removal of building a structure versus demolition?
Well, demolition would involve
Oh, like blowing
raising a
up.
building or burning it for the fire department to work on. Removing the structure could be as simple as taking the shed and putting a flat base. Or more, this would come up more often for single wide.
Oh, okay, just taking the whole.
Do we have experts that can do the plan review on plumbing, mechanical, electrical, fire suppression, and gas, all those things?
Steve's got all this stuff.
It's all completely licensed and certified now.
So starting backwards, moving backward. building permit extension after 6 months, that means if they haven't started it and they want to extend it or renew it, not if, say, they work for 4 months and weather or bankrupt or something, they temporarily stop and they don't get it finished, and they don't have to come back in if there's some external, conditions, act of God, force majeure type of thing.
Typically, if it's going to be over 6 months, we would ask them to do the permit.
So even if they've started it and for some reason, I don't know, it's some commercial building or some exotic house and they can't get the materials or there's a strike or whatever, they can't, you're going to charge them because,
Well, we still have to go out.
but it's beyond their control. So we're still going to charge them.
And it's beyond their, and again, that's a matter of, it's beyond our control as well. We're just trying to
You
catch.
gotta think about the ones that let set for 2 or 3 years also.
Well, that's
Do
different.
nothing,
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, but if someone started to do something,
No, I'm talking about after they start and then they don't do anything for even up to 12 months because they didn't figure on cost or whatever, that's not on them really.
I think that John was talking about if it's a 6-month period gap where there's no activity, they need to then go back out.
Well, my point was gonna be, this is new, right? So there's gotta be,
Well, there's
there
lots
are
of
reasons that, yeah, y'all need, this is something y'all run into.
A lot of people will come in and get their building permits and, in anticipation, and then they just sit on it, they don't do anything at all. Now, to your point.
yeah, that's different than what I was trying to get at.
Right, that, for that part, more than likely, John, Betty is not going to charge the extension fee, because they'll be communicating with us, but when you sit on a fee, building permit for 6 months, that stays in our system, and then all of a sudden, we've got to go back out, that we wouldn't have to ordinarily. We would like to stop the practice of preemptive building permit applications.
I say in general, the fees, can we get a comparison of, the other, say, contiguous counties,
We have,
King, Queen, Carolina?
we utilize 5 different localities.
But we don't have those ones, can we get it for?
That's correct, that was for the work group, so
Okay.
that we could bring y'all a finished product.
Okay,
But we did do all those comparisons, and we sat down and looked at, what did I do, Hanover, Gloucester,
Caroline,
Caroline.
and Queen.
You're telling me we're not accessible?
We're not. That's something we were.
but we can get that for the
Yeah.
25th, is what I'm.
Yes, we have that.
Okay.
But we're not accessible that way, it's something we're sensitive to on the road.
For the other ends, I got other comments and questions.
In the same section?
Yeah.
Well, no, I can recall from, years ago when we did this revision last time, and we've revised a lot of fees from, things that hadn't been looked at since the 80s to get them to where they are now, and so I'm not surprised they need a little bit of adjustment. Yeah, I'm for the most part okay with everything here.
The second two items there, and I was mentioning the ride, to Ron, inflatables per ride. So now we're gonna, inflatables weren't in this before, so now every time a church has a function.
There's no change.
Yes,
It says
inflatables weren't
current,
included in it.
yes, current
No.
fee is 100, it says it right here.
They're adding.
We're adding inflatables.
Making sure inflatables were included.
So every
Well, that's
time-
not current then. It
It's
should be
in
proposed.
Rides are 100, they're adding the parenthetical expression inflatables, so
Oh,
we're
I see.
gonna charge every church event
Yeah,
a
that's what it
$100
seems.
fee for inflatable, which
Every birthday
not
party.
necessarily agree with.
We do.
The only things that we're not charging right now is county-owned buildings
So-
and schools.
I don't agree with that myself.
Well,
The same thing with tents, so we're gonna start charging churches that have tents set up for homecoming events and stuff like
That's
that?
over 900 square feet, and those are your commercial grade tents. And you have to understand, we have to go out and inspect those. We are stamping that they are safe to be used. So, yes, we are gonna put some type of requirements on there.
So are they currently getting some type of permit or something?
For inflatables, no?
No, nothing like that, but the tents, not.
Yeah,
And you're talking about large tents.
all the people want to have a wedding, they're back, for their sons or
I
daughters.
remember watching on the news where an inflatable went flying through the air.
Oh, that, yes. The inflatables, and back to the church, as far as charging the fees, most of the, all of the time, the tent companies come in and pull the permit, the inflatables, the people who do that. The church doesn't pull the permit, it's the people with the rides and the inflatables. who-
Then on the inflatable.
Yeah. The
Well,
ones
they're
who are
gonna
renting
pass,
and
they're gonna
leasing it.
pass that on.
And again, it's a lot of scary stuff with the rides. We need, whether we charge the fee to churches or not, that's not.
So that includes water slides also, to places, churches that have like inflatable water slides in the summertime and stuff.
Any inflatable, needs to be inspected.
I just want to bring up, like you said, this is in comparison with other counties, so other counties do this, so we're just behind the scenes, we're just,
Yeah, inflatables are relatively new.
but I mean, other
thing.
counties do
You've seen the
charge.
I've been
process.
around, yeah. And I agree with Bob, dealing with the churches, I wish there was a way around that, but it's still not gonna make it safe by saying the churches don't have to do it.
You
Well,
can't exempt
I'll do-
churches.
I would do it, my thinking would be the same if you wanted to exclude churches from the fees. Like, my argument's always been, I don't care about the fee as much as make sure it gets inspected.
Well,
So
that's-
the board or whoever, if y'all decide to go, hey, guess what, we're not gonna charge fees for churches, church, worship groups.
Are there other 501Cs that do that type of thing?
Oh, you can pick any of them.
But
I mean, almost everyone has a field day or, almost any of the church.
I personally would like to exempt the 501C for the fees,
All of them?
my personal opinion. I mean, I think 501Cs are exempted from using, there's no fee for using the high school facilities and stuff, are they? Do they charge no fee? I don't know. I don't know. I think it's something to think about, between now and then. And especially if we're not going to have a hearing where people are going to be informed and notified by public comment.
I'm more concerned about the safety of this.
And again, like we do with the county buildings and with the school, we don't charge a permit fee.
Right, like you
But
said,
they have to pull the permit so that we know to go inspect it.
you can always bring up questions on the 25th.
And maybe if we could look at just, like you said, you went to other counties, and other counties are charging this now, that's all I'm worried about, as long as we're keeping up with everybody else. Like you said, it's a safety thing, it's not for the fee, if we have to go out there and do the service, and we need to be paid for it, like that's why the county's getting behind.
And I'm gonna be honest, I ain't gonna be like every other county either. If we had an issue with it, and that's why they bring it forward.
You gotta strike a balance between covering the costs, capturing as much of the cost as you can, and also making sure that you're not keeping people from coming in and getting the stuff inspected that they're supposed to be getting inspected.
And that's the key for, the attitude is we just want to make sure people pull permits so that we can get out there and take part. I mean, that's the important thing. But we do need the fees to keep doing what we do.
Can't keep doing it for free. And then the other part, the square footage, that just makes it a lot easier for you all, as it is gonna be more, I'm hoping, because it's,
It helps cover utilities especially, 5-mile long pipelines, and solar facilities, that's 576 acres
okay.
divided by 44, 460. And it's also, it really is difficult in square footage, and it's not really fair. If you look at putting in an HVAC system, you look at the square footage of the building, you charge a permit just for that guy to put that part in, all of a sudden you're looking at a huge permit for the actual 3 square feet. Like, it's much easier on construction costs, but I think we're fair.
Anything? All right, Bob.
Okay, well then what I will do is, we will speak with John and go send that out to you all before the 25th. And at the same time, we'll take the 5 localities that we reviewed as part of this process and send it out as well. Okay.
Sorry, one other question. What constitutes a special inspection? Is that defined anywhere?
That is a catch-all category, if it doesn't fit, but they still need us to come out and look at something. We have a way of charging for it.
And the building department did request that we keep that in there.
Yeah, I was just curious
It
if
doesn't
it
come
was
up very
defined.
often, but every
And nothing
once in a while-
changed in terms of the amount, I just didn't know if it was defined anywhere.
It's basically your catch-all. If it doesn't fit a category, we have to get out, take a look, and we have a way to capture that.
Where would hot tubs come under all of it?
Hot tubs,
Most of them are 220.
hot tubs, I have no idea, but if you, but I didn't, here, I want to ask John about hot tubs, because that's a good question. He would go out for the electrical, and then if you're hooking up a hot tub, you're gonna have to run, it runs on a separate circuit.
I mean, they do have some that are 110, but a lot of them are 220.
Everyone I've seen with the 2D, they had to put in their own circuit breaker for it, just like you would for heat pump. And that we get
And
an
that
electrical.
can be dangerous because you're talking about, it's a GFI 60 amp, Joe, and not, well,
It's not your
if they do it right.
Yeah, but yeah, on that,
Anyway.
you'd almost have to get anybody installing that would have to pull an electrical permit.
Thank you, Ron.
Guess we're up to the animals.
Yes, sir. The next one is the original animal shelter. Ms. Betts did request that on the reclamation fee, that it be changed from $20 per instance to $25. So the first time an animal was reclaimed would be $25, the second time would be $50, the third time would be $75. So that's increasing each one by $5.
That's obviously a problem.
That is a problem. Also, the per night boarding fee, we've had 3 major animal seizures, probably over a 4-month period this summer. We started with Chihuahuas, we went to Samoyeds and Huskies, and we wound up with Great Danes. And she has completely blown her food budget just with the Great Danes. So currently, we charge a $10 fee when it comes to the restitution that is awarded by the court. She's asking that we change the boarding fee to $15, and we've reviewed it against other localities, and that's pretty much standard, is around $15. And I'll be glad to send all of that information as well.
And that's paid by the place where it was seized?
That the boarding fee is part of the restitution that the courts order.
So what about in the case of, say, there was a tornado or a storm or something, because it is a regional facility, it's also a FEMA type shelter,
There's
so.
no charge for that.
Okay.
No. Any other questions on animal shelter?
This one, just hit me, and since it's regional, is the fees are for either county.
Correct. The next is Parks and Recreation. Under the facilities rental fees, there were no changes. Under the seasonal recreation programs, there was just some clarification. After-school recreation for full-time attendance, it was currently at $1,770. The $50 per week was just a clarification that Ms. Fox requested. It still comes out to the same dollar amount, but this way, instead of the overall flat fee, it's a weekly fee.
They do that because some folks are getting into the program later or earlier, I mean, or get out early.
And so it's a little bit clearer in the posting of the fees. For summer sneakers, full-time attendees, the current fee is $1,045. The proposed is just to change the language, is $120 per week. And summer sneakers, the 3 days, is currently $765, and she's requesting that it just be changed to $85 per week. The total all comes out the same, it's just a little bit easier for, I think, the parents to see what they're actually paying. And we're deleting the youth soccer, all ages. There's been no activity in that area for a while, and so she just asked that we delete that category.
That's surprising. What soccer was this for?
Well, and that's just it, there's a couple of other nearby privately controlled leagues where most of the kids go play. And then the YMCA at West Point operates a league too, so.
Well, that's for everything.
And the last category is fees for independent instructor programs. There are no changes there. The last four are choral, youth BFIT, youth overtime athletics, and young Rembrandts. Ms. Fox requested that we delete those last four because they have not been active. And those are the only changes for Parks and Recreation.
And they had to come through us on all these, and they had no participation because of program?
No, it's just as we're updating the fees,
Okay.
then we're just going to delete those from the website and our fee schedule.
And then we're up to item 4B, radio infrastructure upgrade contract and financing. You start that, I'll be down before.
I'm sorry, sir. Gentlemen, what we are bringing to you is the radio upgrade infrastructure that Motorola has proposed. They have come out multiple times to talk to the board and do presentations. We have Mr. Fryer here tonight with Motorola. We also have Jimmy Sanderson with Davenport and Company. We had requested as staff that the board approve us going to the 4 cell tower sites. The cost of that is $4.4 million. The project would take approximately 18 months to complete. Motorola Solutions provided us their financing options. Davenport and Company worked with us to put out an RFP. There were 13 responses, and Mr. Sanderson will go through those. Tonight, what we would like is for the board to give me guidance on approval to go ahead with the agreement and also direction on the choice of funding. So, Mr. Sanderson, if you could come up.
Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
Good.
I've got a presentation that I put together for you we can use to walk through. Is that right there? And we can go through it. After speaking with county administrator, we did solicit proposals for the E911 funding. We went in an amount up to $4.6 million, just added a little bit extra. You don't have to borrow up to that, but that's the amount the banks were given. We looked at 2 different, and I'm on page 1, Joe, 2 different financing terms, 7 and 10 years. Wanted to see what the rate differences were, let you see what the overall debt service would be on an annual basis as well. And you can see at the bottom, we ended up getting 13 different financing institutions submitted proposals, so that was very good. Obviously, the more you have competing, the better chance you have at better interest rates. Flip over to page 2. Wanted to give you a sense of those that provided proposals for 7 years. And they range from a low of Bank of America, just shy of 1.9%, 1.85% on the interest rate, to a high going out of 4.73% from Essex Bank. So a big spread between those. I guess I should back up and say these are tax exempt rates the county can borrow at. We also looked at, because it's been important to this board in the past, the ability to repay the loan if you have an opportunity. And we've laid those out for you here too. Bank of America, for example, said you could only prepay it after the first half of the term, so after 3.5 years with no penalty. BB&T, for example, gave you two options. You can do any time with a 1% penalty or after the first half with no penalty. And you go down a little further, Zion Bank said any time with no penalty, but there is a difference in the interest rate there. For the 10-year option, there was one less bank, one bank backed out, but 12 banks gave us a 10-year option. Again, Bank of America was the low bidder, just under 2%. The next group of them were all right around 2.25%. So very good interest rates. And again, we also looked at the prepayment provisions that we've got here. Very similar for the first two, B of A and BB&T. I did want to note that the fourth one in this case is U.S. Bank, and they were the provider of the loan that we did back in 2012 for your first upgrade to your emergency communication system. And that's going to come, keep that in mind, that's going to come back in a minute. I wanted to show you on page 4 what this would look like on an annual basis for your debt service costs. And these were, we just picked the first top 4 or 5 banks for the 7-year amortization option. So you're paying back a little bit quicker. Your debt service is going to be right around $715,000, depending on which one you were to choose. Your overall debt, you can see down the bottom, again, obviously that includes the repayment of $4.6 million of interest, and that's one of the things that we'll have to decide is the maximum amount that we borrow. The 10-year amortization on page 5, again, we've got here Bank of America, and then we showed this next grouping of banks that were right around 2.25%. Your annual debt service drops from the $715,000 range to call it $515,000, so about $200,000 less on an annual basis. You're obviously financing it for a little bit longer, and so your overall debt service is going to be a little bit higher. It's about $200,000 or so higher in debt service by paying it off over 10 years versus 7. And that's just a function, ultimately, of whether the board's comfortable with an annual cash flow payment of $500,000 or increasing it by $200,000. Before we get to the next page, one of the things, we got these proposals back on Wednesday, and we've been talking to the banks, in particular Bank of America, about some of the details of their proposal. It gave me a little pause as to whether we'll be able to work out everything that they want. And so one of the things that we wanted to obviously show you was what the other proposals were too. And then ultimately ask the board, after we have a conversation about 7 or 10 years, look at maybe the top 4 proposals that we've gotten, and give us a chance to go back and make sure that all of the requests that they have are satisfactory, but you as a board could delegate to the county administrator, as long as we are entering into a transaction up to X dollar amount for 7 or 10 years at your liking, and an interest rate no greater than, pick one, whichever one, if we were to say U.S. Bank, 2.262%. And then we can go back between now and your next board meeting, which is 25th, go back, work out the details, and then bring you a final proposal with all the documents and contracts associated with that banking institution. The reason I mentioned U.S. Bank in particular, I don't want you to keep that in mind, if you were to do the 10-year option in particular, U.S. Bank was the lender on the last transaction. One of the concerns that the Bank of America at least raised, and we haven't worked all out with the lenders, was whether U.S. Bank as the first lender on the communications system in any way would be able to step in front of them as the lender of the second sort of upgrade to the system, and be able to take their equipment, because the equipment acts as collateral on the loan. So that's just something that we haven't had a chance to work out with the lawyers to make sure they're comfortable with. And I wouldn't want you to presume that we're going to be able to close the transaction with Bank of America and then come back to me and say there was a problem. So I think at best that would be the right one to go with, because their interest rate is lower. But again, if you're looking at, we can talk about it more, but if you're looking at the 10-year loan, the next 3 banks are right there at that 2.25% interest rate. And I just think it would be good for us to keep in mind, I think the fallback would be U.S. Bank, who was the lender on the first transaction, If there's any question about the ability to distinguish the collateral between these two loans, U.S. Bank's the same lender on both transactions, and we'll be able to get to a solution.
There's no way the lien would go against the new equipment.
I'm with you 100%. But we've got to be able to demonstrate to Bank of America that that's the case. I mean,
Just because it makes sense, doesn't mean.
the original
it's
transaction was the specific equipment that you purchased was the collateral, right? But they're having some consternation about whether it is a system, and therefore this new added equipment would become part of the system, the emergency system, that somehow the first lender could come in and say, no, you can't take that equipment. All of this is in the cases that the county doesn't pay on the line, and it's the only reason they would ever come in. So I agree with you, Mr. Chairman, that I would think that we make Bank of America comfortable, but I know banks, and sometimes they just, they can't see the trees for the forest, or the forest for the trees. So I just don't want to presume.
I hate to bring this up, but what if we asked them if they would match the Bank of America rate? I mean, like you said, worse things would happen. Can we ask them, well, if you'll give it to us for $199, we'll definitely give it to you, then they'll own all the equipment.
We can't, I don't think they would do that.
Oh, you don't? I thought this was one thing.
Yeah.
So they wouldn't have to worry about who's collateral, who,
Yeah,
and what.
they all have their own ways that they come up with these formulas for the interest rates. It's based on all of their reserves that try to do. If it were really close, maybe, but it's a fairly big spread between the two. And we'll have to go back and have a conversation with Bank of America too. Bank of America's rate is good through November 6th. So they said, we'll hold the rate through early December to close the transaction, but you need to tell us whether we're the preferred lender by November 6th. So we're going to have to go back and talk to them. The good news is rates haven't moved a whole lot since then, so I would expect it to be in the same place. But that's a conversation that we can have with them.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I have questions. So the top four were based solely on the lowest interest rates, right?
That's
So in
correct.
the case of, say, for example, if we wanted to repay it, Zion, although for $40,000 difference, to me, Zion might be a better option because there's no penalty for prepaying.
That's correct. Yeah, on the 7-year transaction, that would be correct. They would not give us a 10-year rate.
Right, so, and then I guess comparatively, for 7 years, basically this is what is it now? 4.3? What's the amount of the bid?
Up to, well, the loan that we got.
4.4. So the 4.4 million for 7 years is basically costing the county around $500,000.
No, the numbers that we ran here were an amount up to 4.6. So the numbers that you're looking at on page 4 is a borrowing of up to 4.6 million.
Okay, so how much is borrowing money going to cost the county for 7 years?
So in this case, if you look at the Bank of America,
Mm-hmm.
it would cost you $364,000 to borrow that money for 7 years from Bank of America.
Okay.
So just take 4.6 million away from that number. And the same thing on the next page, for 10 years,
Okay.
4.6 million, it's $529,000.
Okay, so, and then,
So Zion's about a $500,000 more, is that correct? No.
Not for 7 years.
7 years, it's very minimal.
$40,000.
$40,000.
$40,000 more. So, 4.5, whatever million dollars, the money that the county has currently in terms of unreserved fund balance, how much is the county going to make over the next 7 years on that money? Have we extrapolated that to determine a cost benefit in terms of how much is the county making on that versus how much is the county going to incur by borrowing money?
I think you're gonna find that with the interest rates, it's gonna pretty much net out. if we were to
If we were to invest,
invest it,
yeah.
which is around 2%, and Harry would can speak to this, or if we were to take out a loan at around 2%. So it would pretty much net out. But at the same time, you also have to remember that we have to, as a locality, retain a fund balance.
Understood. And
So you also don't know what interest rates are going to be. That's based off interest rates right now. So they could, your investment rates, your investment rates could go, they could go down over the next 7 years, or they could go up too. But
Right,
right
this will be
now,
locked in. So basically, you're going to be, you know, pegging a locked-in rate versus a fluctuating rate.
mhm.
Generally speaking, the way that I understand these bonds to work, and the way that we've done it in the past, is we typically wouldn't be looking at a cost-benefit analysis that would run us to wanting to pay one of these off probably before the half term anyways, right?
I mean,
Generally.
yeah, I mean, it's a, you're looking at what your fund balance is and what's the
Sure.
level that it should be at. If you've got monies above that, sort of threshold level, then you have in the past looked to see and pay down debt. That could occur in the first half of the loan, or it could occur after the second half of the loan. I mean, most transactions, there is some period where the banks want to lock you in for a little while, so they know they at least have a loan for half the time. This is the way some of them done. Others are less worried about you paying off the loan. Part of that is because just frankly rates are so low. Most people don't pay off a 2% or 2.25% loan when you're earning, you know, almost the exact same amount in your investments.
Right.
But if short-term rates were to rise, which they have been, not to say they won't go back down, you oftentimes you're in a position when you're borrowing for a short term like this, you can earn at or above what your cost of borrowing is.
And all these banks raised the question about the repossession,
Just Bank of America.
just bank.
That's correct.
As far as what's on the books, and I don't have this information in front of me, we would have seen it at budget time. What do we have on the horizon as far as outstanding bonds that are going to be retired in the next handful of years?
If you will look at the handout that was by your station,
I was in the presentation looking for it, there it is.
this is, the top portion is what current county debt there is. The yellow lined area is by adding this in, this radio upgrade, and what I did is I took the median of the top 3 or 4, and so I selected that. The bottom section is for the schools, so you can see that this runs from fiscal year 20 all the way to the last payment due for Hamilton Homes to fiscal year 38. I've also included in the memo in front of all of this where we stand on our debt ratios. And in FY20, our annual principal and interest is $2.39 million. We are carrying an outstanding principal balance of $23.6 million. If you add in this financing at 100%, in fiscal year 2021, when the first payment would come due, our annual payments would be $2.9 million, and our outstanding principal would be $26.7 million. And the third page on that memo talks about, debt. One of the criteria is debt should be less than 3% of assessed values. In fiscal year 2020, we're at 1.5%. If you add in this new debt, in fiscal year 2021, we'll be at 1.64%. So we're in very good standing.
And that's before new assessment.
That's correct. That's at the existing assessed rates.
So, again, looking comparatively at the banks and the summaries that are provided here and such, Bank of America had a question in terms of
The collateral.
collateral.
Yeah, that's right.
BB&T looks like they're possibly having closing costs, it says to be determined. Zion, again, to me in terms of no prepayment, no closing costs. What can you tell us about Zion? I mean, in terms of,
So we've done stuff with them before. They're a bank out of the Midwest. They're competitive in this tax season world, so they're certainly someone that we're not concerned about as an entity and whether they would honor their commitment. We work with them. I think one of the questions, Mr. Chairman, is whether you want to look at the 7 or the 10-year, and then you're asking very good questions then about, once you maybe pick between 7 and 10 years, then look at and maybe give us some guidance as to whether you would rather have more flexibility from the prepayment perspective, or whether you would just want to get the lowest interest rate, or whether it's a combination of the two. And the 7 versus 10 is purely the cash flow perspective, $700,000 versus $500,000 a year in extra cost. But to the point that's being made, even if you were to do the 10-year transaction, if you get flexibility on the prepayment ability, you could pay it off in 7 or 5 or earlier than that 10-year mark. But it would give you the flexibility of having a lower payment in the meantime.
If you're considering Zion, they're not in.
They do not have a 10-year proposal. I think if you're looking at the 10-year proposal, obviously U.S. Bank, again, the benefit there is that they provided the existing loan on your emergency system, and theirs are prepayable and whole after 13 months. So just after a year, you could prepay that one in its entirety.
so what's the detriment to the 7-year option with Zion and paying using half of the unreserved funds, and only financing half of it?
So, and County Administrator can elaborate a little bit, but my understanding of your fund balance, which now stands at, call it 6.6, it's not that number that you need to focus on. It's the low point during the year of your, I'll call it just your checking account. So 6.6 million, the fund balance is just a number that happens to be at the end of the fiscal year. So June 30, that's how much you have in your bank account. But that fluctuates during the year. The biggest issue with all local governments is that your revenues that come in are cyclical. So I look back at what County Administrator provided. You receive 70% of your revenue in a 4-month period, two different months, two different periods, but 4 months later. So the low point in the last year for your fund balance was less than $1 million. Correct me if I say something wrong. Was less than $1 million. So if you were to spend $1 million out of your fund balance right now and put that towards this loan, when you come to that trough in your cycle again next year, you will have a negative number in your fund balance. You won't be able to pay your payroll and your other costs that month. Now, you'll get money the next month, but you'll have a problem from a cash flow perspective that 1 month. Now, localities that are in that position, and there are some, they do a borrowing. We used to do it here, a revenue anticipation note, we call it, that sort of bridge that gap. And so that's what the reason why you have a fund balance, most localities, is to make sure, even though it's high, it seems high at one point in time, measurement of a year, but you got to look at what its low point is in particular. So that will be my biggest concern, is if we use fund balance to pay this, that we would have a problem come October of next year.
But we put $2.5 million from the unreserved fund balance into the capital, and it's just sitting there. I mean, isn't this a capital expenditure? Why couldn't we utilize that in terms of, in lieu of, or as an augmentation for this? I mean, it came from this fund at the beginning of the budget cycle. Why couldn't we just transfer $1 million back into this rather than having it sit there unused rather than borrowing?
And that would be up to the board of supervisors.
I mean, that's an option. I'm just trying to understand pros and cons for all the scenarios here.
Is that 2 million or 2.5?
It was 2 million for the infrastructure and 225,000 for the broadband
That's
initiative.
what I thought.
Over and above, just to make sure I understand, over and above the fund balance.
6.6.
Yeah, so it was 8.6, so to speak, but we transferred 2 million into capital. So, I mean, it was just a matter of moving the money from one account to the other. So again, I'm just trying to make sure all the scenarios is discussed that, you know, so.
And if I may, Natasha developed it's in your packet, the form that speaks to the lows and the highs of cash flow as we go through the year. She has the full year for fiscal year 2019, and then the first 3 months of 2020. But, yes, we do have 2 million sitting in the capital. That was set aside for infrastructure. Primarily, I think that we were thinking water lines, things like that, sewer, and, but it is up to the board to determine how they want to expend those funds.
It wouldn't be sewer anymore.
Well, HRSD. So basically, you can utilize that. I would like us not to touch the general fund unassigned, because even though we have 6.6 million in there, if you look at the CAFR, the 2018, it's also in this packet. If you look at 20% of your revenue collections for the last 2 years, you're right at about $30 million each year. So 20% of that would be 6 million, and then the 600,000 is restricted for the schools as part of the reconciliation because of the split levy. So we truly have 6 million in unassigned, and that will be reflected in the capital for 2019. But also keep in mind that the infrastructure funding, we are going to be bringing additional recommendations to the board come January and February, once we get our strategic planning initiatives finished. And that will dovetail in with the master utility plan and the areas that we're designating for potential build-out for water lines in the ground. And when you're talking about a 12-inch water line running about a mile, that's over $1 million. That'll eat that money out very, very quickly. So there are other uses, but there again, it is up to the board to decide how they want to expend those funds.
So one of the ways to think about that may be if you've got projects out there that are of the size that maybe you don't want to go through with financing and the hassles and the timing and the costs associated with it, that's a good use of your cash reserves as well. So if it's $1 million project, that's something that would be sort of, unless you just don't have the cash for it, that would be on the smaller end of the borrowing size. So you could certainly use the money to pay down a little bit of this debt too. I'm just suggesting that if you've got something else out there that's $1 million project that might work for that money that you set aside, you probably wouldn't finance $1 million project if you had enough funds sitting there. So you wouldn't have to do a financing on that project. If you take the $1 million and put it into this transaction, pay cash for $1 million here, you're going to have to come up with $1 million for the utility project. And $1 million just by itself is not going to be really economical for financing. And if it's utilities, those are the transactions we usually finance over a 30-year period, 25, 30-year period. Because the assets last a long time. These assets don't. These are probably 15-year, 12-year length.
Would the financing, the institutions be the same for a utility project? Because aren't there some, in terms of, what is the one that's associated with Nuveen? Nuveen is a...
Nuveen is they're a buyer.
Right, but they sell VML, bonds.
There's VML Vaco, which does a program. There's VRA, Virginia Resources Authority.
Right.
We've talked with you all
Right.
before. They have a utility program as well. And you can go into a pool.
Right.
With them.
So, there,
Not an
above ground fee.
A pool of borrowers, right?
Okay. And be speculative as to whether their rates are higher or lower. Sorry, I'm still thinking about one thing. Okay, I think I've got all my questions answered at this point. I guess, Ms. Tassinari, and why do we use 20%? Is that written in our SOP somewhere?
It is not,
12
and
in Orange and 15 in Stafford, we seem to be on the high end, I was wondering why we're using 20.
well, what I've also included in your packet is documentation from the GFOA and another national institute that basically states that it depends upon the locality as to what kind of percentage that you want to hang your unassigned general fund balance at. Because of the way we are growing, but we are growing very slowly, but very consistently. 1.5%, sometimes 2% per year. But because of the split levy and some other factors, instead of going with the minimum 10% or 15%, I think I go with the high side. I would rather have a reasonable fund balance so that we can address any kind of crises or unexpected. Now, I will be bringing some policy drafts to the board in the next month or two, asking for the board to set the percentage rate. My recommendation is 20%. The board may not agree with me. The board may decide that 15% is fine. And if that's the case, then that will be the percentage that we carry forward. And then any extra would, at the end of the close of the year, would then be swept to the capital fund. So, there again, I just tend to err on the side of being very conservative.
And the sort of underlying question has to be whether 10% accomplishes the goal that you have of obviously not having a deficit in any given month. You got to put that in there too. So if 10% were to be a number that would put you in a deficit in a given month, obviously.
Right, oh
it's
yeah.
not.
Now, those of us that weren't on the board, but sat in the audience have seen and heard those horror stories about,
This boardroom is not gonna be.
absolutely.
So, Mr. Chairman,
You were asking, I'm trying to get down to what our recommendations are for staff, and that's to go back to 4 of them.
so the real question and answer we need is 7 or 10 years. Whether you want to finance this over 7 or 10 years, your guidance from. And then what I would suggest is, depending upon that answer, if it were 10 years, for example, I would say allow us to go back and make sure that we can satisfy the requirements of the lenders up to the first four lenders, which would take us through U.S. Bank.
One question, which do y'all
10 years. 10 years.
Again, I think that gives you flexibility from a cash flow perspective, but also, like you've done in the past, if you have an opportunity to pay down debt, some of these in particular give you an opportunity to pay it down after a period of time. U.S. Bank is the best one, has no penalty after 13 months. You just got to weigh, would you rather have the absolute lowest interest rate with less flexibility on prepayment, or a little bit higher interest rate, still good, and better prepayment ability?
Absolutely. I think Travis was saying that very seldom we pay anything off much earlier than half.
Well, that's right, and then I'm also looking at this list and wondering if we go through, if we're getting this one at near 2, 2.25, as some of these others mature, they're probably at less favorable rates. And some of these, as they reach end of life or full maturity, it might make more sense to pay off, to shed some higher interest vehicles as well, as opposed to one that we're getting at, pretty low rate.
You're always going to go and look at, if you're ready to pay something off, we're going to look at what the interest rate is and what the prepayment penalty, if anything, is.
So if we go back and we decide ultimately that we do want to use something out of one fund or another to get rid of some debt, it might make more sense to look at some other debt that we're carrying as opposed to this one in particular. Maybe.
It's always maybe. All right. Bob, what's your thoughts on the recommendation?
financial situation better than me, I just hate to pay more than we need to. The 7% seems like it has benefit to me, but I defer to your expertise. 7 years, sorry,
Oh,
7
okay.
years.
Damn, I didn't see that
7
interest
years,
rate.
7 years. I'm looking at
At this interest rate though, the penalty between 7 and 10 and over the life of the loans is, fairly low compared to some of these other rates that we've had to absorb in the past when rates were much, much higher than that.
Mhm.
So from a cash flow perspective, if I was financing something at this lower rate, I would probably take the longer term.
Let's pay it off.
Steve?
Agree, take the 10 years at the low rate, and if we look at something later, maybe we can pay off one of the other high debt, if we decide to do that, I don't know.
Maybe with the-
For the first 4, maximum.
There's only, you're showing 3 for the 10 year.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, there's two of them are exactly the same rates, Zion Bank and,
Sign drops off.
BB&T and Key Bank are the same
Right.
in option 10. So there are 4 that I would like you to say you're comfortable with going up to the U.S. Bank interest rate. And let us go back and see if we can work out things with Bank of America, which I think would be ideal. And the fallback, if there are any issues with anything, would be U.S. Bank, slightly higher by 1 basis point higher than the other 2, but very good prepayment provisions, and we know that they did the first transaction, so I've got great confidence that we could work with it.
And
work it out with them.
what's that highest rate on that one?
On page 3, Mr. Chairman, U.S. Bank's at 2.26, I think it's actually 2.62%. 2.262.
All right.
Where did I read in terms of closing costs or loan origination fee? Do all the 3 that are shown here for 10 years, do they all waive the loan
So,
origination and closing fees?
Bank of America had none, BB&T was non-committal, it was, they said there would be some fees. Key Bank was none, and US Bank was none. BB&T would be nominal if they had it.
Even with that, looking at their rate, I believe I'd go with 1, 3, and 4 on the one back one.
Yeah, and there's no difference in the interest rates, it's almost identical. If one's got extra costs, then I would go with the one without the cost.
That's my recommendation. 1, 3, and 4, go back to and discuss. And obviously, I think we have majority, we have 3 to 1.
Oh, yes, sir.
And I'd rather go 7 years, but I think the best way, and our staff is saying that's the best way for us to go, and I think we need to do that.
Understood.
Good to see you.
Good to see you,
Thank you, sir.
Good
Except
luck.
you always cost me money.
I like to look at it as we save.
Saving money.
Right now, I can tell you that Jimmy saved us quite a lot of money over my time.
I'm sure. Thank you. All right. That being done, do I have anything else, Bobby? I'm sorry.
No, Mr. Fryer's here, we will if they'll have any questions about the upgrade itself.
I had someone contact me, and I didn't have the information, and I know he's gonna, there wasn't a different antenna being installed in West Point, correct?
Yes, there will be a new antenna installed.
A new antenna in West Point, okay, and that was gonna be worth,
On the existing site.
or what?
Existing site.
Existing
Oh,
site.
existing
Yes.
site, so not really built.
Yeah, correct,
Okay.
already built.
I think that was really the question, and I didn't have this stuff with me, and I'd rather put it on their end. All right, now,